Hi, everyone. This is Lynn Crawford from Hope Dementia, and I am delighted to be welcoming Ann Richardson for our presentation today. And let me tell you a little bit about Ann. We're so lucky to have her. She is a board-certified chaplain, spiritual director, labyrinth facilitator, and Reiki master, as well as a writer and award-winning poet. Her years working in hospice deepened her understanding of life transitions, grief, and loss. This sparked her passion for creating intentional space for people to listen to their own stories and inner voice. She established Nurture Your Journey in 2016 with a vision of creating safe and sacred spaces for others to reflect on life's transitions. She offers individual spiritual direction and resources to professionals and sees herself as an apprentice to grief, a wise mentor in living life fully. Being close to the earth grounds her, and if you follow her blog, which I highly recommend because I follow it, you will often see references to her experiences being in nature. She is very grateful to Hope for the opportunity to present today, and we're very grateful to have Ann. So it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for that kind introduction. Oh, wait a minute. I think I wrote it. Thank you. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and play the slideshow. Here we go. So as you know, I can't see you. I'm going to get my screen figured out here.
Can I interrupt 1 second?
Yeah.
Because I forgot to remind everyone that if you have questions as we go along or later, if you will put them in the chat or in the Q&A, we'll see that Ann gets them at the end of the program.
Yes.
And now I will mute myself.
And you're going to have opportunity. I'm trying to figure out how to get this. Stop sharing. I'm trying to figure out how to get my little screeny thing to work here. Oh, well, I'm going to have to look at myself. So, well, first I'd like to just welcome you all here today and acknowledge that I can see myself in the little box, but you all, I can't see all of you. So, but we are a community that we've come together. And I want to acknowledge or invite you into the next 90 minutes to just shift from being a caregiver to a care receiver. This time is about you. It's your time. So get comfortable. Hopefully you've gotten a cup of tea or a glass of water or a cup of coffee. And if you haven't, go ahead and run and put your kettle on or get some water and do whatever you need to get comfortable. And have a pen and paper handy too, maybe to jot down some questions. And also, I believe in making experiences when I present experiential. So a time for you to be in this room, this virtual room with me and to engage with me. So make this time your time. It can be very overwhelming to be on a journey with someone with dementia. It can be exhausting. And so this is a time I want you to just take time to receive. This time is for you. I'd like to start with a quote from Kim Campbell. It was Glenn Campbell's wife. And you may remember he died from, I believe it was Alzheimer's dementia, about 1.5 years ago. And I'm going to start with her quote because I like the way she reframed something. I never say I put or placed my husband in a home or facility. Those terms feed a negative stigma that keeps people from getting the help they need. I say our family joined a memory care community. It was our community too. We lived each day with families on the same journey. We laughed together, cried together, prayed together, and supported each other. If this disease becomes too difficult to manage at home, being part of a quality memory care community should be your first choice, not your last resort. So I just say that because sometimes if you're caring for someone in the home, it can be exhausting. And sometimes people feel like they've given up if they move someone out of their home. into a care situation. And also my experience when I used to be a chaplain that went into memory care, as she calls them, communities, is it was a place to connect with other families and with staff. And there really was often a sense that it was a community. So I just like the way she reframed that as a caring community. So if you feel like you're in a situation where you're, when you have someone at home and you're wondering if you're on the edge about what you should do, I just found that a lot of truth in that statement for her. And also want to acknowledge, though, that she did say quality memory care community, and that when you're working with in our society with the financial burdens of dealing with someone with a long extended timeline with dementia, that sometimes it can be very expensive. So since the pandemic, it's been a time of exponential loss. So let's just take a moment before we start to sit and acknowledge all that has unfolded since the last 2 years. Let's just imagine everyone gathered here and take a breath in and out. Though we can't see each other, and I saw 25 before I lifted my screen up and put on the presentation. So there's at least 25 of us here, if not more at this point. And we're gathered here together in imagining this as a circle, all in our separate places, but we're a community. And we're connected by loss, and we're connected by this dementia journey. And even before the pandemic, there was this dementia, this connection of loss and of breath. But there's something about the pandemic that's even deepened that connection. And let's talk about breath. When you do a deep exhale out, it does something in our bodies. It connects with our sympathetic nervous system, that part of our brain that calms us. And so as we go through this presentation, I'm going to be engaging us or asking us to breathe quite a lot. I know I need to breathe because I get a little nervous when I do a presentation. So I'm going to invite myself to do a lot of breathing too. So as we take a breath in, and I invite you to take a longer breath out. I always find this really helpful when I'm in a situation where I go in somewhere and the energy's kind of ramping up. It's happened a lot these days. Something about the pandemic has made people a little bit tense. So if you find you're in a situation and you walk in, say to a situation where someone doesn't want to take their medication, or you're around a bunch of kids and they're like really excited, but you need them to calm down, you find that you start to do your breathing exercise and just start to slow your breath and do that longer exhale out. Sometimes that can just bring the energy down in the room, and it can bring your own energy down to a calmer space. So I'd like you to hold on to that while we go through this presentation. So I'm going to start with a few statistics and a few awarenesses. So when I did this presentation last year, and this is the second time I brought it back in Zoom, and I did it the first time in person a little over 3 years ago. Then since the pandemic, they did some research in 2020, and this article came out in the New York Times. And the one thing that COVID really showed is just how frail the care system is for those caring for our loved ones with dementia, this frail system. And lockdowns and isolation really tore holes in this already frail system. So as I went back through the article, what I really wanted to emphasize from this article for where we are today, even 2 years out, is you as the caregivers, as the loved ones caring for folks with dementia, is you fill in for that patient, for that resident. These are the quotes, so they said patient, but I say the resident. You fill in where the person with dementia can no longer exercise their moral agency and their moral experience. You bring their values to the table, their story. There's one thing we are as humans, and that we're narrators, we're stories, we're meaning makers. And sometimes on the dementia journey, we lose that capacity then to engage with our past, where we have our stories and our moral agency. So you are that bridge. And when there was isolation and lockdowns, that bridge was broken. Also, when carers are unable to visit, all of a sudden people who were taken away, and you would often trigger a lot of those memories and keep people engaged. And that strand was broken. I remember when I was working and going into memory care communities, and I'd sit with people at lunch, and I'd see, say, a daughter or a spouse helping with meal times or at activities, and they'd help with other residents, and they'd help with the staff, and it really was a joint effort to keep everybody engaged. And all of a sudden, that was withdrawn. So there was a lot was withdrawn with that isolation. If you're at home with somebody, that was another bit of, not a bit of stress, a lot of stress would add exponentially. For instance, if you used to get out a couple of days a week and somebody was able to go to the daycare center, that was shut down. Or you couldn't go out because it was hard to explain that you had to wear masks now out in public. You weren't able to have someone come into your home because you were afraid of getting COVID. So just layers and layers of stress added to situations. So there was a need for more. It just showed how much there's a need for more support at all levels, for you, for paid caregivers, and also for the most vulnerable, your loved ones. And just a couple of statistics that you've probably heard over and over again, but the World Health Organization says that around 50 million people have some form of dementia, and that's going to triple by 2050. The United States is projected to have 13.8 million people by 2060. And we already know that COVID has some link, or it's reported to have some link to memory issues. And so these numbers, I would imagine, would rise. And the quote in the article says, then what will things look like? Already the American system of dementia care is broken, sustained by a feeble network of unpaid family caregivers and underpaid high turnover labor that will be further strained as the population skews older. So already the system is hugely expensive, with an annual national cost of roughly $300 billion. So on that light note, we'll move right along. So this is a book I highly recommend. Help is Here When Someone You Love Has Dementia. Anne Hill walked through dementia with her mother, and Marion Hodges was her doctor, her gerontologist. I believe she was a gerontologist. And together they saw there were not enough resources, an easy book for people to have on this journey. So they wrote Help is Here When Someone You Love Has Dementia. And it's, I let someone borrow the book, but it's a lovely book in that it has little dividers in it. It's easy to read with about 6 chapters, nice illustrations. So I highly recommend the book. I'm going to go ahead and read this whole slide. And just, if you want to, you can just close your eyes and listen to the words. When a family member is diagnosed with dementia, the entire family suffers a shock, and everyone in the family begins grieving, each person in their own way and on their own timeline. Even though the family member with dementia hasn't died, there's no getting around the fact that the family member has been diagnosed with a progressive, incurable disease that can be emotionally traumatic. Dementia can be particularly difficult because families often feel like their family member is slipping away one brain cell at a time. And in some ways, the families are right. I'd like you to take a moment and just sit with what I read. When a family member is diagnosed with dementia, the entire family suffers a shock and every family begins grieving. So take a moment and just take in those breaths. Consider the first time you finally had that diagnosis and knew finally that dementia was now part of your family's life. So a little bit about how our time will unfold. We're going to go on a journey. We're going to have some definitions. We're going to take these breathing breaks. I'll explain a little bit about what that is. You're going to be encouraged to reflect on your losses. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions. Most important thing is, I'd like you to be kind and gentle to yourself. Kind and gentle. Take in what you need. If something goes by you, that's okay. Just assume you'll get what you need, even if it's only one thing out of this whole presentation. Assume that's what you'll get. That's the one thing you need, and the rest, you know what? This is being recorded if you want to listen to it later, or I'll give you my contact information if you want to get a hold of me later. But take away what you need and leave the rest. That's okay, right? So the breathing break is, we'll do these check-ins to take a few deep breaths and check in with how we're doing. When I say deep breath, I just mean breathe as you feel comfortable. For some of you, that might mean going and breathing deep down into your belly or down all the way down to your toes and doing a big exhale. I mean, that's the thing about being at home, right? Nobody can hear you breathing. Or for some of you, you might just be able to breathe a little bit up here in your chest. I mean, it's allergy season, right? So you might be coughing or not be able to take very deep breaths. So just listen to your body, do what's comfortable for you. It'll be time to check in with yourself emotionally. Are you feeling tired, cheerful, sad, overwhelmed, a little numb? So you'll just kind of check in and see where you are in that moment, which is what we're going to do. Each of these breaks will just tie into a little segment of the presentation. We'll check in with your body and see what's going on physically. Are you feeling really tight, a little queasy? You got a bit of a headache. So, just see what your body's saying to you. You'll also see if your mind is checking out, not as a judgment, but just as a point of curiosity. Maybe you're just feeling overwhelmed and you just don't have the bandwidth for this today. The breathing break also allows for present moment awareness. Where are you right now? And this is also just something to practice when you're going about your daily life, if it's not something you're already doing. So for example, if you're needing to get someone to the doctor and you plan ahead and you say, okay, whenever we need to go to the doctor, I know I need at least an hour and a half to get from point A to point B. And even with all your best planning, it's not going well that day. So you feel yourself getting tense and you're getting frustrated and all sorts of things are coming up. Okay, so you're doing this check-in. You go, well, a lot of stuff's coming up for me. What do I need to do? Take a few deep breaths. I'm getting frustrated. I'm getting tense. Okay, I'm aware of all those things. I can let that go. So it might be a practice you want to take away with you. Just briefly who I am, Lynn shared with you my background. I was in hospice for almost 8 years. And I was an adult child of someone, my mother, who had Alzheimer's. She died just over 4 years ago. My mother lived independently until she couldn't, and then she lived in assisted living. She'd been widowed for 32 years at the time of her death and never remarried. So I was her primary emotional, spiritual, and go-to support. I was her darling girl, as she used to call me. I do have one sibling who lives out of state. So he helped out when he could, but distance left the bulk of the responsibility to me. Now I'd like you to take some time and let me know a little bit about who you are. Are you the primary? And you can type this in the chat, and Lynn will read back and let me know a little bit so you can hear who all's in the room with you here. So are you the primary caregiver? Are you a partner, adult child, sibling, friend, another family member, or other? How do you know each other? What are your current living arrangements? Are you in the home together? So what's going on? And then how long has your family been living with the diagnosis?
We have partner, adult child. She lives on her own. Marianne says adult child, mom lives in a memory care community. It's been about 2 years. Shelley says primary caregiver, adult child, living and caring for mom and working full time. This just jumped. There we go. Also paid caregivers during the day. Amy says adult child. Every time a new chat comes in, it jumps. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
It's a challenge. Here we go. Primary caregiver, adult child, living and caring with mom. Did that one. Adult child, mom lives with us now. We are less than 6 months into the diagnosis. Primary adult caregiver for both of my parents. I live with them, vascular and frontal temporal respectively. Beth says, friend, my best friend just got the diagnosis. Sandy says, I'm an adult child. Mom is living in assisted living and doing well. She has super short-term memory loss. She takes directions well. Judy says, primary caregiver, take care of my husband and we live at home. Dorothy says, partner. Pam says, partner, a little over 2 years. We have no support at this time. I'm adult child. Mom is now in hospice care at Ray Hickey Hospice House.
Thank you. There's one in the Q&A. Did you get that one? Or was that a question?
Well, let's see. Oh, she put partner.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for answering that. So now you know a little bit about who's here in the room with you. So thank you. Quite a broad range. Everywhere, everything from a fairly new diagnosis to hospice. So here's a definition of anticipatory grief that I like because it's very concise.
Let me give you one more because it's different.
Oh, thank you.
Sister.
Ah, sister.
And he lives in assisted living, has been diagnosed for just over a year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So stuff is looming. And I got this from a presentation I went to on anticipatory grief and bereavement through mindful photography and reflective journaling. So just something to put in your thoughts about journaling and using photography as a way to journey through your grief. But stuff is looming. So the invitation with dementia is how to stay present in the moment in the face of stuff looming. So having a conversation between those two, what's coming up versus being in the now. A longer definition of anticipatory grief is how do you care, or when caring for someone over time, is you start to grieve that person before they die. Or grieving the loss of a person's former self. And in the case of dementia, we diagnose it we're learning to diagnose these things even earlier, right? this disease of dementia. So they also start to grieve themselves. So you have that both and too. So you learn to experience, or you begin to experience the loss of someone on a daily basis. So you're anticipating those losses and you know what's coming, or you think you know what's coming, right? So it can be just as painful as the loss associated with the death. And there are so many memoirs and articles and movies out there now that represent different journeys of dementia, that you can start to say, oh, I think that might, is this what's going to be coming for me, or my loved one? Is this what our experience is going to be like? So you start to anticipate what's coming. I definitely had that as my mom's dementia worsened, and I'd go into assisted livings and memory care places, and I think, well, is this what's coming down the road for me? So I definitely had my share of anticipatory grief on the way. Caregivers may experience guilt or shame for wishing it was over, or thinking someone was already gone. We often hear, well, they don't even know me anymore, or they're just a shell of who they were. They used to enjoy life so much, or they used to be able to go out and work, or they would be in the garden, or, this isn't the person I knew. So there's this sense of, I wish it was just done. They wouldn't want to live this way. So there's this sense of guilt about wanting the journey to be over. And then you feel guilty and shamed about that. It's important to realize that is very normal to have those feelings. If you have that experience, if that thought has crossed your mind, that's normal. And ultimately, anticipatory grief is a way of allowing us to prepare emotionally. So I say it's like packing your bag for a trip that's coming up. So as you start going through this grief, you're getting your case ready for the trip, which is death. Now, as you know, whenever you take a trip, you might encounter things that aren't the same once that trip arrives. So anticipatory grief doesn't replace the grief after a death, but does help prepare. This is important, that preparing the death of a loved one can allow family members to contemplate and clear unresolved issues. So even though someone may not be able to engage with you, okay, let's just say relationships are complex, complicated, parent, child, spouses, friends, siblings, all those relationships, if we're being honest, they are not smooth sailing. And if we'd like, we might want things to clear things up. A very famous book a few years ago was The 4 Things That Matter Most, a book about living by Dr. Ira Byock, which is based on the Hawaiian ritual of the Hawaiian forgiveness ritual of Ho'oponopono, which is saying, I love you, I forgive you, please forgive me. Oops, and I'm just forgetting the other one. That's really, and I'm sorry. I love you, please forgive me, I forgive you, and thank you. That's the 4. So working through these relational issues with someone with dementia can be very complex, because sometimes you might want to work on your side of the street and you can't get something back. Doesn't mean you still can't work on them. And this is part of your anticipatory grief, though, because you may have thought, okay, I'm finally doing my work, and now they're not there to work with me. Or I had situations where someone, out of a sense of deep responsibility, was caring for a parent that was not the best parent. They were able to say, you were not the parent I needed, and I'm still here. I'm able to be here for you. They're able to do the work they needed, despite their parent not being who they needed to be. And I don't know if that makes sense, but there's those relationship issues that when someone has dementia, they can't fully participate in maybe those healing rituals you may have wished for. So that complicates those things. I've also saw a lot of mysterious and, the brain is the mind, the brain is, there's so much we don't know. And people that were so far into their dementia, their ability to connect with somebody, and yet there would be these moments of clarity where someone would come in and say something like, our life was not perfect, but I do love you. And there would be a moment of recognition, or a moment of, you could just tell, a shift, and then a letting go. So you can still have those conversations, even though you feel someone may not feel like they're connecting. And then the other thing I'd like to say is, it's also this long trajectory also gives you time to make end of life plans for funerals and burials, and deciding what you want to do with advanced directives. And that's my soapbox. I feel everybody should have an advanced directive by the time when they turn 18 and on up. You can always update them as you go along, and having conversations about what you want done, should you not be able to make your own decisions, and what you want done for your memorials, burials, funerals. There's this great thing called the Death Deck, and it's a little card game, and helps us to have honest conversations about what we value in life. So that's one thing anticipatory grief lets us have those, start having those conversations earlier than later. So now I'm going to invite you to do another breathing break and ask yourself, is there any stuff looming in your life? Is there any stuff looming in your life that's rising to the surface? Take just a couple of breaths. Hope you're all being kind and gentle with yourself. Okay, I'd like to talk about ambiguous loss, which is another large part of anticipatory grief. And ambiguous loss are kind of partners with dementia. Type 1 ambiguous loss is when a person is physically present but psychologically absent. So when people incrementally disappear. And Pauline Voss is a psychologist who actually coined the term, and she's someone who has a spouse with dementia. I haven't actually read her book, but I've heard her speak on this podcast, On Being, with Krista Tippett. And I highly recommend, if you like listening to interviews, it's a very good one. She did the original one in 2016 and then updated it because of the pandemic. But I just want these are a couple of really important points from this particular podcast, that ambiguous loss is complicated, and they're complicated loss, and therefore it's complicated grief. So what your grief is now, it is complex. People that don't have someone in their life that's going through dementia may not understand what you're going through, why you're grieving. It can be chaotic and painful, and it goes on a long time. Dementia is usually not a short-term situation. My mother's was about a 7-year journey. And I know there have been journeys that have been 10, 15 years. So it's a long time, and you grieve all along the way. So it's a chronic grief for incremental death. So she says one way to live with ambiguous loss is to have the ability to hold two opposing ideas in your mind at the same time. We don't do that very well in our Western thinking. We like things to be clear cut, black and white, hot and cold, right and wrong. You need to be able to hold two opposing ideas at the same time. So sometimes, let's say you have someone with dementia, she says, and they're there, but they're not always there. That may be the closest to the truth you're going to get, but it can help reduce your stress. It's like you might have those sweet moments when someone has clarity with you and you have a loving conversation for, 5-10 minutes or half a day, and then they go back into wherever that place their mind takes them. You live in those two places at once, and you understand it's the both and learn to hold those two places. But that gives you agency and takes away a sense of helplessness. So that's ambiguous loss. So take a moment now and consider the ambiguity of your loss. How comfortable are you holding two opposing views? That your loved one is both here and gone. Now do a moment, do a couple of breaths and check in and think about that ambiguity. That they're both here and gone. Remember to do a kindness check-in. How are you feeling? How's your body feeling? Feeling tight anywhere? Just relax. Remember to be kind to yourself. Okay, this is a labyrinth. It's a modified chart labyrinth. It's not a maze. It's a one-way path in towards the center. And in my experience, I found it's a great metaphor for the dementia journey. And the reason I say that is towards the bottom, I wish I could make my little thing, towards the bottom is the entrance. And it's a one-way path in towards the center. It's one circuitous path. And while you're on this journey, you may feel like it's a maze and it may feel very confusing many days, but you're only on one path. And there's no wrong way to do this journey. You're making the best decisions that you can with the information you have in the present moment. So you are on one path. You're on one path. There's no wrong way. And some stretches are long. You see those long outer stretches, and they might feel like they're going to go on forever. And that can feel comforting, or it can feel unsettling. Either way. And then you'll come to some terms and they'll be sharp. There might be a fall or a UTI or something comes along, and all of a sudden everything in your world kind of shifts suddenly. And all of a sudden you're unbalanced. Your world is unbalanced. You will eventually reach the center, which will be the death of your loved one. Now, you don't walk this path alone. Others are on the path too, besides the person with dementia that you're caring about and for. Other family members, other people in your community. You're all going at your own pace. You're all on there at different times, at different points on the path. So you might be just entering the path and see someone on the far end and go, whoa, how did they get over there? And I wonder if they can help me, if they can tell me some of their experiences. So it's okay to call across and say, hey, how can you help me? What information do you have for me? You may find yourself walking a little faster than somebody else and pass them on the way, depending on what your journey and your experience is. You may enter into the labyrinth at a different time than someone else in your family. My experience was for me and my brother, because I saw my mother much more frequently. I saw her her progress up close and personal, whereas he lived at a distance. And I don't know if you experience this, if you have someone who's farther away and doesn't see your person so closely, but she would rally all her energy for those weekly phone calls with my brother, or for his quarterly visits when he'd fly out for a long weekend or a few days. And she would manage to be pretty clear for him. And he'd say, I don't know what you're talking about. Mom seems pretty like she's doing pretty good to me. And that is not unusual, especially in early stages. So different family members may have different views of what's going on, which can lead to some conflict when you're making medical decisions, especially if your medical power of attorney is at a distance and you're the person up close. So just know you might be at different places on the path. And it's okay to go at your own pace on this journey, but eventually you'll all reach the center. And it's okay to stay in the center and grieve that initial death as long as you need. Grief will come at its own, grief is its own time, and you don't need to hurry. So what I'd like to invite you to do, there it is again, is if you had a chance to print out the labyrinth that Lynn sent you, is to go ahead and walk using your finger or a pen or a pencil tip. And if you don't have it, then just go ahead and do it on the screen. And I want to give you about, 3 or so minutes. I want to be aware of our time here, so I don't want to take too much time to do this. I want you to just think about how you've been with dementia so far and how it might unfold for you. And just take some time to trace the labyrinth starting at the bottom, and imagine or think about how you entered into the journey, maybe how the journey is going for the person you're walking this path with, and just sit, just quietly, just trace the labyrinth to the center. If you get to the center and you want to come back out, that's fine. But for right now, just think about walking to the center. If you don't get to the center before the 3 minutes are up, that's fine too. I'm just going to set my timer for 3 minutes and let you go. Okay. It's a little under 3 minutes, but want to make sure we have a time to get to everything. So if you would like to share in the chat, what came up for you as you walked the labyrinth? If anybody would like to share an experience, maybe a word or two or a sentence.
Wait, what was that?
Maybe it was a new experience for everybody.
Just how sharp
Can you say that
that
again?
last turn was,
Mm,
and the sign that there is limited time.
limited time. Mhm. Mm. Did anybody
How,
else?
how unexpected twists there are in the path.
Mm-hmm.
If the journey is not linear, so many sharp turns.
Mm, mm.
Overwhelmed, dizziness,
Mm. Uh-huh.
lots of turns. You can't see what's coming. It
Uh-huh.
makes it hard to prepare yourself.
Ah, hard to prepare.
Some of the paths seem very long.
Mhm.
I do have feelings that change from day to day about this journey.
Mm.
The long stretch along the outer edge took my breath away.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. You can actually physically walk a labyrinth. If you go to labyrinthlocator.com, you can type in your where you live, and you can actually find a local labyrinth to walk. Let me recommend.
Judy says, I feel like I've been through so much, but his physical health is so good that I feel like I'm just at the beginning.
Wow.
There are lots of turns. You can't see what's coming next. It's hard to prepare for it.
Wow, your insights. Yeah. Yeah. So, and no labyrinth walk is ever the same. So you have these labyrinths. If you print it out, you can use them over and over again and see what they offer, see what it offers you, see what the labyrinth offers you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. We'll move along to emotions, but if you have any questions also at the end about labyrinths, you can offer those to me. So emotions that accompany anticipatory grief are similar to those that occur after any loss, but as we heard with all the turns on the labyrinth, they can feel like a roller coaster. So some days might feel really hard, and other days you might not feel any grief at all, right? You're just going along like a regular day. So because it is such a long, chronic, long-term event. So listed are some of the typical emotions, and please keep in mind that everyone grieves differently. So I won't read them all, but sadness and cheerfulness, fear about impending changes, the death, loneliness, anxiety, guilt, intense concerns about the person and their decline. You might rehearse the death. I used to do that a lot with my mom because of the industry I worked with. I used to rehearse what it might look like, and it did not look like that. And then physical problems. So these are some emotions that come up. So I have something called the tangled ball of emotions. Now, this original one that was put out there I think it was in the 60s. had words in it, had denial in the middle, and I've adapted over the years. So I had a friend drop the ball for me, and people would write in their own words or they'd color this in. So there's many ways you can use this. But if you don't have the ball, that's okay. Actually, it might just be easier for you. I want to just take a moment, a couple minutes or so, to drop in a few emotions, or not drop in, but maybe write down a few emotions you might be feeling, today or the last couple of days, that maybe as you look through this list, or they might not be listed here. I'm trying to think if numbness is on here. Yes, it is. And I want you, just a thought here. Numbness is an intelligent function. It tells us we are overwhelmed and need space to process, to slow down. So numbness, I want to say, is an intelligent function. I like that definition of numbness. So let's just take a minute and look at those list of emotions and any that might not be on there that come to mind. And maybe just circle a couple if you have them printed out, or jot them down if you have a piece of paper. Now, I ask you to type in the chat. Again, take a couple of breaths, right? And type in the chat maybe one or two emotions you identify most in this present moment. What's stirring for you right now as we're talking about emotions and this journey that you're on?
The best says sadness, loneliness.
Mm.
Loneliness and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety and panic attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety, isolation, and exhaustion.
Mm-hmm.
Loneliness, depression, and anxiety.
Mm.
Despair, sadness, abandonment, loneliness, dismay, sorrow.
Mm.
Ranges from optimism to great worry.
Mm.
Margaret says, I'm sorry I have to leave, but I hope to watch the recorded version. Thank you so much. Good teaching strategies.
Thank you for coming, Margaret. Take sweet care.
Robin says, helplessness, anxiety, and exhaustion.
Mm-hmm.
Judy says that she feels unsettled, relief, and distrust.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Those, as you heard those emotions, I heard a lot of similar emotions. They're heavy emotions. Again, another reason to open up and breathe and listen to your body, and take care of yourselves with kindness and gentleness. Because this journey you're on is hard. It's a hard journey.
We have despair,
Mhm.
sadness, and frustration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like I spoke about at the beginning, and the pandemic intensified, support is not readily available. Yeah. Thank you, Lynn, for reading those.
Sure.
Yeah. And these are some losses, some of them anticipated and unanticipated, that I've gleaned through my reading and experience. Is And I think they came through in the emotions that were shared, is this loss of connection to friends. They no longer know how to talk to you. Your world becomes smaller, and that was certainly intensified with the pandemic. Your lack of energy. It takes a lot of energy to be a caregiver to somebody who you're trying to connect with in this whole new way, different language. You have very little energy left over to be with friends or to be with yourself. This feeling guilty about enjoying activities that you used to do, whether you did them by yourself or together, so you might not share them. And physical intimacy, maybe this was somebody you used to be able to hug or hold hands, or you didn't like, you didn't used to hug, and all of a sudden they're hugging you all the time, or whatever. Boundaries have changed. Your way of engaging has changed physically. So that's one. You can't bounce decisions off this person. You can't share stories about friends and family. If you're related, you might fear getting dementia. My mother had it. Her mother had what was called senility. So you're insecure about the future, financial insecurity. And if you are the primary caregiver, it's very hard on your own body to do the caregiving yourself. And I'm sure you have your own long list of experiences of losses. So I'm kind of keep an eye on the time here, and I have one more exercise. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes just to jot down, right, because I have one more after this. So maybe 3 minutes to do this one, and then we have one other one. So in the midst of caregiving, we can feel like, you might feel like a different person. You might wonder where you went. You may have been someone who just really had a lot of joy for life, who used to go out and do volunteer work or spend time with siblings and friends, or going out to eat, or whatever it was that gave your life a lot of meaning and zest. And maybe now you've, like I heard, overwhelmed, lonely, isolated, and you wonder where you are, that you're a different person. So I'm going to invite you to write for just 3 minutes using one or two of these I statements. So just write free. Don't overthink it, just to get this out and see what comes up for you. So I am, I wonder, I say, I dream, I hope, I remember, just a 2.5 minutes. And then we're going to do our last exercise. And then we'll have time for one more exercise that I think really seems to be helpful for folks. Then we'll have time for questions. So go ahead and that's what that pen and paper were for. Go ahead and write. And just find a place to rest your pen or pencil. And type in the chat maybe a line that you wrote if you feel comfortable. And also, did anything surprise you in what flowed out of your pen onto the paper? What may have surprised you?
So we have, I feel anger at my siblings and guilt for being angry.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we can make it through the journey without her not knowing who we are.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if I'm making the right decisions for my mom.
Mm-hmm.
I miss my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that the old me will come back. I worry about life without him and fear the next. I wonder if I will ever feel joy again. I wonder how long this journey will continue. I wonder how fortunate, or I remember how fortunate to know them in a way that no one else did, and now get used to those memories to share her now with those who didn't get to know her in this way. I want to be able to leave town, but I feel trapped. I fear I'll forget the good memories. I'm unhappy, and I hope I live through this. I try so hard. I'm trying to still have a life, but I want her to be safe and happy. I resent my sibling for not helping. I hope I am able to care for him in our home throughout his illness. I dream of travel and having friends to hang out with and the freedom to leave when I want. I feel trapped. I also have anger towards my siblings, lack of relief for me.
Thank you, everybody, for your honesty, for your tenderness, for holding space for everybody else's words, for sharing your journeys. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to share a poem I wrote a couple years before my mom died, and then we're going to do a prompt, a final write for this before we go into our question and answer. It's called Mom's New Friend. At first, Alsie dropped by for occasional visits. She enjoyed reminiscing and distracting you from the boredom of everyday retirement, widowhood, aging. Then she became that new friend who invited herself along on a trip to the grocery store, telling you what you need and discarding your list. Soon she was stopping by for dinner, staying for dessert, watching TV into the wee hours. She never offered to do the dishes. Eventually she moved in and she became so familiar you forgot to tell me about her. She said it was okay to take long naps in the afternoon. Those bills really didn't need to be paid. And why take that medication anyway? She would go driving with you and give you bad directions. When I found out about Alsie and asked about why she was taking up so much of your time, She got upset. So I stopped asking. And the three of us learned to walk together in a new sort of relationship that feels like autumn took a sudden turn to winter, and I forgot my fleece-lined jacket. I wonder what happened to your forgotten memories. Did Algie shred them? Put them in recycling? Or maybe they're in the storage unit and she'll bring a few back someday. Some moments you understand your new friend has taken over your life, but the moment passes. And Elsie, she has days she is generous and some days she is stingy in sharing you. I want to ask Elsie if she has a daughter who is waiting to be my unbidden friend, so she can sidle up beside me with a case full of pastel paints ready to cover my history. And when I visit the two of you, the room feels crowded and sparse at the same time. And I want to tell your unwelcome friend to leave and forget about you. So I'd like you to take a moment and write your own poem or prose piece using one of these prompts as doorways to talk to dementia or enter into your experience with dementia and your loved one. Say, dementia, I wish you would, or when I entered the room, or the last time we, or whatever you would like to say. We're going to write for 5 minutes, because I want to leave time for questions and answers. Well, I don't know that I have the answers, but for questions. And we'll write for 5 minutes, and then we'll do like we've been, where you have a chance to talk. So for 5 minutes, and please don't think about it. Just let your pen flow. And just take a few seconds to finish up your final thoughts. And we'll gather back together. All right, take a couple of deep breaths and check in with yourself. See how you're feeling. And then if you'd like to, maybe share a line or two from what you wrote and if anything surprised you. And then we'll move into some questions.
I wanted to share, Anne, that somebody had put in the chat that they loved your poem.
Oh, thank you.
Marianne says, Dementia, I wish you had never entered my family's life. You are a thief, you are destructive, you are cruel.
Hmm. Hmm.
I cried.
Hmm.
Go away, Dementia, you are not fun. I wonder when and what is going to happen next. I miss my husband so very much. Can you please leave and let us love and live again?
Hmm.
Dementia, I wish you would help him find a joyful place and throw away all of the negativity and anger. Help him find good memories of my family instead of bad. Just let us have some peace.
Oh. Hmm.
When I entered the room, things were different, subtle, sticky notes everywhere, and the house was a mess.
Hmm.
We have someone that says they have to sign off now, but thank you so much. It was so healing.
Thank you. Take gentle care. Over it.
I will continue seeking support and information to courageously finish this journey.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely.
Dementia, I wish you would leave us alone. I miss my funny brother. Now his humor is tinged with you.
Hmm. Beautiful. One more.
Dementia, I wish you would have chosen someone else, but I really wouldn't wish you on anyone. Never.
Hmm. That's true. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to move along so we have time for questions, but this is an exercise you can go back and do, focus the energy onto the dementia itself instead of the person who has it. So I found it a healing way to shift that energy onto the dementia. So in the end, remember to treat yourself with kindness, please. I have this little stone, it says kindness, kindness. And now it's time for some questions. So if you can type those in the chat versus the Q&A, I think works fine.
Let me give you the one last line of poetry.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
When I enter the room, I'm not sure who I'll find. Will you be happy to see me, or will you retreat into anger?
Oh.
And then a comment from Shelley. I was shocked at how many are dealing with siblings' lack of support. That is probably the most frustrating thing to me. I try so hard to let go of my anger and frustration toward their lack of help and support and willingness to give me a break. How do we deal with that anger?
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. And that Help Is Here, that book I mentioned at the very beginning, does address that. So, you used to say that your dynamic as you were when you were children, if one was the bossy one and one was the used to get away with things kid, or whatever your dynamic was when you were children, tends to all rise back up to the surface whenever you're in a stressful situation. That's what we used to find when we were working as a team, a hospice team. And that those dynamics will tend to rise again. And if you can't have honest communication, which is a skill that we are sorely not trained in this world, it seems, to listen to each other and talk. So if you are the primary caregiver and you're exhausted and you have a sibling that just is like, well, I can't, I work, or I can't come over, I'm busy, I have my hair appointment, or whatever, whatever the situation is, that someone doesn't step up, digging a little deeper to find out, maybe, we start to be curious. There we go. There's the word I'm looking for. How can you be curious about why they don't want to be participating? So an example would be, I can't come because I'm too busy. Well, maybe underneath the busy is they're too afraid to encounter your parent not at full capacity. Maybe they had a difficult relationship with your mother and they were not seen as X, Y, or Z. So what does it look like to parse and to try and go under another layer? And how is your relationship with that particular sibling? Has it always been a good relationship and now it's only shifted? So trying to go a little deeper and check in with curiosity, which can be.
Further comment on this one is that they live in Hawaii and Italy. They say their kids and family come first. All I ask is, can you plan a week break to get me free from the house?
Yeah.
Nothing. Crickets.
Crickets. Yeah, I heard that one too. And they won't engage with you at any level, not even, they don't answer that question at all.
Nope.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that you have that your family won't help you. When you ask for what you ask for what you need, and your family isn't there to support you, like, it just goes a lot deeper than that, right? And what I'm hearing you say is that that's adding to your stress, and you're not able to get what you need from your family.
He said, I have said I'm on the verge of breaking. Please come and help me.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty direct.
Yeah, that's direct, and doesn't sound like they're going to help you.
And then another individual says, although I resent my sibling's lack of involvement, I also realize that he's missing a lot of wonderful moments with my mom, moments that I'm having. Yeah, there's some situations that can't be remedied with one conversation or with a magic social worker or chaplain to come in and gather everybody at the table. They are deeper situations. If the family won't help by coming in, I don't know if they want to help financially to get you a break with a caregiver.
respite,
Further comment, I am blessed for those moments, but I'm also in need of at least a long weekend, anything.
Yeah. 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 I mean, what I just hear you say is you're exhausted and you need a break. And the source you're hoping to get that break from, people that I know you grew up with, they're not there for you. They're not there for you. And it doesn't sound like you can rely on them to be there for you.
Somebody else said, my Hope group taught me to screw guilt. I did the best I could for my dad on his journey, and now for my mom. I won't end up with regrets when the journey is done. Siblings can be so cruel and judgmental and avoid helping for many reasons. And then back to our first person who says, I cry daily. And then a general question to hosts and panelists. Can you suggest any respite options for folks like Shelley? And my response to that would be, we do have lots of options that we've talked about in groups. So without knowing the individual, it would be difficult to know what has been offered or what can be, but I know that her support group facilitator will be willing to provide information.
Good. Yeah, I hope you can find some support for at least a respite of a few days. Yeah. Like I said about relationships, everything tends to, under these circumstances for the relationships, everything seems to churn up to the top of the pile, and any communication issues that were difficult beforehand are just going to be amplified when you're tired and exhausted and overwhelmed. Yeah.
She says, thank you. I feel heard from you. And I guess it just helps to know that others have sisters like mine. It's very sad.
Yeah. Just do what you can to treat yourself kindly and gently. There are questions? And like I said, the pandemic, if anything, isolated people even more before, where you may have been able to, well, I think daycares and stuff have opened up again, or caregiver resources, but for an extended time, there was everything just closed in a situation that was already very constraining. So learning to just breathe and exhale again, and the confusion of, where do you wear, you still have to wear masks when you go to any kind of doctor appointments and dentist appointments, or, at certain places. So there's that whole confusion for anybody who's already has a mind that's trying to take in the world through these filters that are running amok, and you're trying to make sense of their world for them. And it's, you're trying to make sense of your own world as it changes daily. So yeah, trying to care for yourself. So thank you for even taking the time to be here tonight. I really appreciate you being here and offering me your time. Go ahead, Lynn.
Someone recommends a book, Forgiveness, A Bold Choice for a Peaceful Heart, a book by Robin Kasarjian.
Good option, Lynn. I don't know if I would have.
Perhaps you know that person. I don't know.
I don't either. I don't. Yeah. Yes. Let's do one final check-in. What do you need to leave in the virtual room And what would you like to take with you? What do you need to leave behind? And what do you need to take with you? Just again, check in, scan your body. What are you feeling in your physical self, your emotional self? Take a few breaths. And then I have, oh, and here's my contact information. So if you have any questions, please, it's okay to send me an email and at nurtureyourjourneyemma.net. So you can go there. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Or you can follow my blog. I don't blog as often as I used to, but I do. And you can sign up, subscribe to it on my website at nurtureyourjourney.net and receive it in your inbox. And then
So we have a thank you very much, Anne.
You're welcome.
And again, thanks so much for sharing tonight. And then the comment, leave behind sorrow and take with me the memories.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And here's my mother and me and my dad.
Awesome.
Girl. So there's my thank you slide. So yes, thank you all again for being here. And yes, send me an email. If you want a copy of the PowerPoint, I can send it as a PDF to you. If you want some of those resources, it's overwhelming to have all this stuff just kind of thrown at you. And you might want to go back and say, oh, what was that she said? Or what was that resource? So please, I welcome your emails. So.
And someone says, leave behind sadness and take away the message to pause and breathe. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. It was helpful to hear each and every one of you. And I loved writing the poem.
Oh, thank you. And yes, thank you all for your sharing and coming together as this community, which just shows how important it is that even though your journey is all very unique, individual, you have these common threads that we weave together into this beautiful tapestry. It may be a tapestry of loss, but it's also a tapestry of hope. So yes, together you weave a beautiful tapestry, beautiful stories. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being here tonight.
And thank you so much. We always get so much out of what you have to say. And somebody says, thanks, Anne. It's like chicken soup for my heart.
You're welcome. Let me see, I'm trying to stop the share. There we go. Stop the share. So, well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And take good care of the rest of the evening. Cup of tea or whatever you need to do to relax. All right.
And before you all leave, I just want to remind you that we will have next month Dr. Barak Gaster from the University of Washington, and he will be speaking about the Dementia Directive. So please attend. Thank you for being here, and thanks again, Anne.
You're very welcome. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Be kind to yourselves.